Alfred Hitchcock, O mestre du suspense, era conhecido por sua genialidade na dirico. No entanto, por trás das câmeras, uma reputação sombria cômico a se formar. Ele não apenas orquestrava terror nas telas, mas também exercia controle psicológico impecável sobre seus atores, muitas vezes levando-os ao limite da sanidade. Este documentário investiga os casos reis e perturbadores que a busca de Hitchcock pela perfeição cinematográfica resultou tormento pessoal para aqueles que trabalhavam sob sua dirico. Como cineasta podia ser tão inovador sua arte e, ao mesmo tempo, tão destrutivo suas relações profissionais? A narrativa explora as táticas psicológicas empregadas por Hitchcock, as ricos extremas dos atores e o legado duradouro de sua abordagem controversa. A linha entre a dirico artística e a manipulação psicológica tornou-se perigosamente tenue nos bastidores de seus filmes mais icônicos, deixando cicatrizes profundas nos envolvidos. Alfred Hitchcock, a towering figure in cinematic history, built a legacy on suspense, meticulous storytelling, and a unique visual flair. His films, from the early silent era to his Hollywood heyday, consistently pushed the boundaries of what audiences expected from the thriller genre. However, the polished veneer of his on-screen masterpieces often concealed a far more complex and, at times, disturbing reality behind the camera. To understand the psychological pressures Hitchcock exerted on his actors, it is crucial to consider the era in which he worked and the prevailing attitudes within the Hollywood studio system. The golden age of Hollywood, roughly from the late 1920s to the mid-1950s, was characterized by a powerful studio system that held immense control over its stars. Actors were often under long-term contracts, with studios dictating their roles, public image, and even personal lives. This environment fostered a hierarchical structure where directors, especially those with a proven track record like Hitchcock, wielded significant authority. Hitchcock, a British émigré who found immense success in Hollywood, navigated this system with a shrewd understanding of its mechanics. He was not merely a director, he was a brand, a visionary whose name alone could guarantee box office returns. Hitchcock's approach to filmmaking was deeply rooted in his desire for absolute control. He famously storyboarded his films in meticulous detail, often down to the camera angles and editing. This pre-visualization meant that when it came to shooting, he knew precisely what he wanted, leaving little room for improvisation or deviation from his vision. While this precision contributed to his artistic success, it also meant that actors were expected to execute his instructions with unwavering obedience. Any perceived failure to meet his exacting standards could lead to frustration, repetition, and a palpable sense of pressure. The psychological dimension of Hitchcock's directing style was not entirely accidental. He was fascinated by the human psyche, particularly fear, obsession, and the darker aspects of human nature. He sought to evoke genuine emotional responses from his actors, believing that their authentic reactions would translate into a more visceral and believable on-screen experience for the audience. However, his methods for achieving this often blurred the lines between artistic direction and psychological manipulation. He understood that to create suspense, he needed to tap into the actor's own vulnerabilities and anxieties, and then exploit them for cinematic effect. Several key individuals were central to these unfolding dramas. Tippi Hedren, an actress whom Hitchcock discovered and groomed for stardom, became one of his most prominent and perhaps most victimized muses. Her experiences on the sets of The Birds and Marnie are particularly well documented and serve as stark examples of Hitchcock's coercive tactics. Alma Reville, Hitchcock's wife and an uncredited collaborator on many of his films, often played a mediating role, sometimes softening his harsher impulses, but also privy to the intense creative and personal dynamics at play. Other actors, such as Ingrid Bergman, Cary Grant, and Joan Fontaine, also experienced the unique pressures of working with the director, though their interactions with his more extreme methods varied. Before the most infamous incidents, Hitchcock had already cultivated a reputation for being a demanding director. His early films in Britain, such as The 39 Steps and The Lady Vanishes, showcased his burgeoning talent for suspense and his ability to elicit strong performances. However, even then, anecdotes of his perfectionism and his tendency to push actors were beginning to surface. He was known for his on-set pranks, often designed to unsettle his cast and crew, a practice that, while sometimes intended to inject humor, also served to demonstrate his control and his willingness to provoke reactions. The transition to Hollywood amplified Hitchcock's power and resources, allowing him to implement his directorial vision on a grander scale. He achieved significant commercial and critical success with films like Rebecca, Suspicion, and Shadow of a Doubt. During this period, he began to more overtly explore the psychological underpinnings of his characters and, by extension, the actors portraying them. This era saw the beginnings of a pattern where Hitchcock's creative ambition intersected with a more problematic form of interpersonal control, setting the stage for the intensely challenging experiences that would define his later career and leave an indelible mark on the actors who dared to step into his meticulously crafted worlds. Alfred Hitchcock, a master of suspense, wielded his directorial control with an almost surgical precision, often pushing his actors to the very edge of their mental and emotional reserves. His pursuit of authentic fear and vulnerability on screen was a hallmark of his genius, yet it frequently morphed into a form of psychological manipulation that left a lasting, and often traumatic, imprint on those who worked with him. This was not merely a matter of demanding perfection, it was a calculated strategy to break down his performers, to strip away their defenses, and to expose raw nerves that he could then capture through the lens of his camera. The evolution of Hitchcock's methods can be traced through his career, from his early British films to his Hollywood zenith and beyond. While always a meticulous craftsman, his approach to eliciting performances became increasingly invasive. He believed that true terror and psychological distress could not be faked, they had to be genuinely experienced. This conviction led him to orchestrate situations on set designed to induce real fear, anxiety, and even terror in his actors, often without their full understanding or consent. His fascination with the darker aspects of the human psyche, coupled with his immense power as a filmmaker, created a fertile ground for these controversial tactics. One of the most stark and widely documented examples of Hitchcock's coercive directing occurred during the filming of The Birds, 1963, a film that would cement Tippi Hedren's status as a star but at a profound personal cost. Hitchcock had discovered Hedren and actively cultivated her career, seeing in her a potential successor to Grace Kelly. However, his patronage was conditional, and his desire for control became increasingly suffocating. During the infamous scene in which Hedren's character, Melanie Daniels, is attacked by a flock of birds in an attic, Hitchcock eschewed the safety of mechanical birds, opting instead to use live ones. He insisted that the birds, some of them predatory, be strapped to Hedren's body with thin wires. The filming of this sequence stretched for days, with Hedren enduring increasingly brutal attacks. The birds, no longer contained, began to peck and scratch at her, drawing blood. She was subjected to the relentless flapping of wings and the sharp beaks of seagulls and crows. Hitchcock, from behind the camera, observed with clinical detachment, his primary concern being the authenticity of her terror. He did not intervene to stop the prolonged ordeal, even as Hedren became increasingly distressed and physically injured. The fear on her face was not feigned, it was a genuine response to a dangerous and dehumanizing experience. Her screams, captured on film, were those of a woman being truly terrorized. The psychological toll was immense, leaving her deeply traumatized and with a profound aversion to birds. This incident, more than any other, laid bare the extremes to which Hitchcock would go to achieve his artistic vision, prioritizing his cinematic goals above the well-being of his lead actress. Hedren's experiences did not end with The Birds. Her subsequent collaboration with Hitchcock on Marnie, 1964, saw a continuation of his psychologically taxing methods, albeit in different forms. During the filming of a rape scene, Hitchcock reportedly manipulated Hedren by telling her that Mark, the man who assaults her, was actually being played by a stand-in, a tactic he later admitted to using to elicit a more genuine reaction of shock and terror from her. This deception, intended to amplify her on-screen distress, was a profound violation of trust. Furthermore, Hitchcock's possessiveness and control over Hedren extended beyond the set. He dictated her wardrobe, her hair, and even her personal life, fostering an environment of constant scrutiny and pressure. When Hedren began to assert her independence and seek roles outside of Hitchcock's direct influence, his resentment festered, leading to further professional and personal sabotage. He reportedly shelved her career for years, a deliberate act of retaliation. The psychological torment inflicted upon Tippi Hedren was not an isolated aberration but a culmination of Hitchcock's directorial philosophy. While many actors found working with him challenging due to his perfectionism and his penchant for elaborate practical jokes designed to unsettle them, Hedren bore the brunt of his more insidious tactics. Other performers, however, also encountered his unique brand of pressure. Joan Fontaine, for instance, in Suspicion, 1941, was subjected to Hitchcock's psychological games, particularly in a scene where she is meant to be terrified of her husband, played by Cary Grant, who is carrying a glass of milk that she suspects might be poisoned. Hitchcock deliberately withheld information from Fontaine about the scene's staging and Grant's intentions, allowing her genuine anxiety to manifest on screen. Ingrid Bergman, a more established star when she worked with Hitchcock on Spellbound, 1945, also experienced his manipulative tendencies. While Bergman was a formidable actress capable of conveying deep emotion, Hitchcock reportedly used her personal life and anxieties to inform her performance. He was known to pry into the personal lives of his actors, seeking vulnerabilities he could exploit. In Spellbound, the film's exploration of psychoanalysis and repressed trauma resonated deeply with Hitchcock, and he sought to imbue Bergman's character with a palpable sense of inner turmoil. Cary Grant, a seasoned and sophisticated actor, often found himself on the receiving end of Hitchcock's pranks. While Grant was generally able to navigate these without significant psychological damage, they served to illustrate Hitchcock's desire to maintain an element of unpredictability and control on set. Hitchcock once famously orchestrated a scene in North by Northwest, 1959, where Grant's character is forced to confront a crop duster plane. The sheer terror exhibited by Grant was partly genuine, as the scene was executed with a degree of realism that unnerved even the veteran actor. Hitchcock's enjoyment of these moments, where the line between performance and reality blurred, was palpable. The evidence of Hitchcock's coercive methods is not solely anecdotal. Tippi Hedren herself has spoken extensively and candidly about her experiences, detailing the psychological and physical abuse she endured. Her accounts, corroborated by other crew members and documented in various biographies and documentaries about Hitchcock, paint a consistent picture of a director who prioritized his artistic vision above all else. The turning point in understanding the extent of Hitchcock's control came with the growing awareness of the impact his methods had on his actors' mental health and careers. What was once perhaps dismissed as the eccentricities of a genius director began to be recognized as a pattern of psychological manipulation and exploitation. Hitchcock's wife, Alma Reville, often served as a buffer, a confidant, and sometimes a collaborator who understood his creative drives. However, even she was not always able to temper his more extreme impulses. She was privy to the intense pressure he placed on his actors and the sometimes unhealthy dynamics that ensued. Her presence, while offering a degree of stability, also underscored the pervasive influence Hitchcock exerted over his productions and the people involved. The legacy of Alfred Hitchcock is complex. He undeniably revolutionized filmmaking, crafting some of the most iconic and suspenseful movies of all time. His technical innovations and his understanding of audience psychology are unparalleled. However, the cost of this genius was borne by the very individuals who helped him bring his visions to life. The stories of Tippi Hedren, Joan Fontaine, and others serve as a somber reminder that the pursuit of cinematic perfection can, in the hands of a master manipulator, lead to profound personal suffering, forcing actors to confront their deepest fears not just on screen, but in the very heart of the filmmaking process. The evidence suggests a consistent pattern. Hitchcock believed that to make audiences feel fear, he first had to make his actors experience it, and he was willing to push them to the brink of their sanity to achieve that effect. The enduring legacy of Alfred Hitchcock is undeniably intertwined with a dark undercurrent of psychological manipulation and coercion directed at his actors. While his genius in crafting suspense and cinematic masterpieces is beyond question, the means by which he achieved these results are increasingly scrutinized. The accounts of actors like Tippi Hedren, who detailed severe psychological and physical abuse on the set of The Birds and Marnie, paint a disturbing picture of a director who prioritized his artistic vision above the well-being of his performers. Hitchcock's belief that he needed to make actors truly feel fear to elicit genuine reactions from audiences led him to employ methods that bordered on torment. This wasn't just about pushing an actor's performance, it was about breaking them down, exploiting their vulnerabilities, and blurring the lines between the character's on-screen terror and the actor's off-screen reality. The implications of these revealed tactics are profound. They challenge the romanticized notion of the auteur director, forcing a re-evaluation of artistic license when it encroaches upon ethical boundaries. The stories highlight a disturbing power dynamic inherent in filmmaking, where a director's vision can, in the wrong hands, become a tool of exploitation. For actors, particularly women in a male-dominated industry of that era, such experiences could have devastating and long-lasting consequences, impacting their mental health, careers, and personal lives. The fact that these patterns have been documented and corroborated by multiple sources suggests a consistent behavior, not isolated incidents. Furthermore, the why behind Hitchcock's methods is a subject of ongoing debate. While some attribute it to a deep, albeit twisted, understanding of human psychology and a commitment to achieving unparalleled realism, others view it as a clear manifestation of control, narcissism, and a lack of empathy. His wife, Alma Reville, often acted as a moderating influence, but even she could not always temper his more extreme impulses. This duality, the brilliant filmmaker and the manipulative tormentor, is what makes Hitchcock's story so complex and, for some, so controversial. The controversy stems from the difficulty in reconciling the artistic brilliance with the personal suffering inflicted. There are those who argue that while Hitchcock's methods were undoubtedly harsh, they were a necessary component of his unique creative process, yielding unforgettable cinematic achievements. They might point to the fact that many actors, despite the difficult conditions, continued to work with him, suggesting a complex relationship where the artistic reward sometimes outweighed the personal cost. However, this perspective often overlooks the power imbalance and the potential for lasting trauma. The modern lens through which we view these events, informed by greater awareness of mental health and workplace ethics, makes it harder to excuse or overlook the harm caused. The significance of these revelations lies in their ability to inform our understanding of the film industry's history, the ethical responsibilities of creators, and the lasting impact of unchecked power on individuals. It serves as a crucial reminder that the pursuit of art should never come at the expense of human dignity and well-being. Alfred Hitchcock's directorial methods, particularly his inclination to induce genuine fear and distress in his actors, have been a subject of intense scrutiny. Investigations into his work on films like The Birds and Marnie reveal a pattern of behavior where artistic vision seemingly took precedence over the emotional and psychological well-being of performers. Hitchcock's belief that actors needed to experience authentic terror to translate convincingly to the screen led him to employ tactics that many now view as manipulative and abusive. These were not merely challenging performances, they were deliberate attempts to break down actors, exploit their vulnerabilities, and blur the lines between on-screen terror and lived experience. The revelations surrounding Hitchcock's practices force a critical re-examination of the auteur theory and the extent of artistic license. They expose the inherent power dynamics within filmmaking, where a director's vision can become a tool for exploitation, particularly impacting female actors in a historically male-dominated industry, potentially leading to severe mental health consequences and career repercussions. The consistency of these documented patterns suggests a deliberate and recurring modus operandi rather than isolated incidents. The debate continues regarding the motivations behind these methods. While some interpret them as a deeply unconventional, albeit twisted, understanding of human psychology aimed at achieving unparalleled realism, others see them as clear manifestations of control, narcissism, and a profound lack of empathy. The role of his wife, Alma Reville, as a potential moderating influence, highlights the complex interplay of support and unchecked impulses. The enduring controversy lies in the difficulty of reconciling Hitchcock's undeniable cinematic genius with the documented personal suffering he inflicted. The primary unresolved issue is the ethical justification of such methods. While some might argue that these harsh conditions were instrumental to his unique creative process and yielded unforgettable cinematic achievements, this perspective often downplays the significant power imbalance and the potential for lasting trauma. The modern understanding of workplace ethics and mental health renders it increasingly difficult to condone or overlook the harm caused. The enduring impact of Hitchcock's legacy serves as a stark reminder that the pursuit of artistic excellence must never eclipse the fundamental principles of human dignity and well-being.